and welcome to the Solo Roleplayers podcast. I'm your host, PJ, and today on the show, I'm thrilled to bring you another content creator out there. Someone whose work I've been using an awful lot and couldn't wait to reach out to and see if I could get a bit more inside details about it. Designer of the Forbidden Lands solo rules and host of the YouTube channel Three Skulls, Matt K. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, I don't know if this episode is going to turn into an interview hearing all about your story or if we're just going to nerd out about Forbidden Lands. But either way, I don't mind. Either way, I'm going to have a good time.
All right. Yeah, I'm happy to do either, so whatever.
Yeah, good.
Let's see where it takes us, right?
Generally, though, I do like to start to get a bit of an idea of how people discovered the hobby in the first place. How did you become aware of RPGs?
Yeah, so showing my age here a bit, in the early 90s, a friend of mine turned up one day with the West End game Star Wars role-playing book and said to our group of friends, hey, let's try this out. And I was a teenager at the time, and yeah, it was just a fun way, pre-puberty, so it's kind of, I think I was on the cusp, 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And basically, we just played for like, I think a year, more or less. Almost at least once a week. Often 2 or 3 times a week. And we just played the hell out of Star Wars and had a blast doing it. Then the friend left and he had the core rulebook. I was living in Asia at the time, so you couldn't just order kind of obscure texts like that, where I was living. So he left with the rules, and that was it, done. I then hit puberty, became more interested in girls than games. And of course, this was also the 90s, so kind of before the internet and stuff. So there weren't as many distractions, maybe, as thinking back on it now, like I could have geeked out really badly if the internet had been a thing potentially. But yeah, anyway.
Better days.
I took a gap until like 2011 and 2000. So it was like a 15-year-ish gap or something. Just randomly, and between that time, so somewhere around maybe 1999 or 2000, I kind of randomly came across a used copy of MERP, second edition, in a bookstore, and I was like, oh, that's a role-playing game. I played a role-playing game, and that's Middle-earth. That's really cool. So I bought it, and I remember just like opening it and trying to figure out how this game worked, and was just completely lost because, I mean, I know now I'm so deeply enmeshed into role-playing. It was Rolemaster, as crunchy as you can get. And I had no one else there with me. I didn't have a group. It was just me reading the book thinking like, oh, how could I play a role-playing game with this? And I just couldn't figure it out. So I had MERP for a long time, sitting on my shelves until I eventually sold it on eBay. And then in 2011, I thought, I'd finished university by that time and was working and was living on my own and kind of, I guess, a bit lonely, and was thinking like reminiscing back to the role-playing days, that we had, and thought, I'd kind of like to really get into this hobby again. And I was living in a city in England, Bristol, which just so happened to have a meetup group for role-playing, and quite a big one. There were like hundreds of members at the time. It's now over like, I think several thousand members now. And they did like weekly meetups at a pub. And I thought, all right, I mean, I got nothing else to do. I'm going to turn up and try out some role playing. So it took a few false starts. I met some archetypal crazies in the first two sessions, but it kind of shows how badly, like how much I realized I loved the hobby, that I stuck with it, tried a different group until I landed on a group playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we became fast friends. We started a new group with a new campaign, and although I never ever DM'd Dungeons and Dragons, and didn't really enjoy the kind of the themes for the game, I still had a blast and made really close friends. We played weekly for many years. And through them, when Kickstarter started becoming a big thing, I still am heavily into Kickstarter, started buying all these other books and trying to introduce them to the table. So I eventually managed to get my group away from D&D in the end. And then I moved to Germany, and that was like almost 10 years ago, and been basically just doing online stuff since. started a podcast, the Mud and Blood podcast in 2018, sorry. Did that for a few years and then left that because there's a lot, just the amount of editing, audio editing was enormous.
Yes.
And I had a YouTube channel I'd started just a little bit before, and basically that was a lot less work to maintain, especially with live streaming and stuff. So that's pretty much where I've kept my focus. And I've not been very active for the past year or so with either game developing or YouTube content, mainly because I have been busy with family stuff. I've got a second kid who's 3, and yeah.
Yep. Enough said.
Yep. It's just a lot of work, and and I've kind of my energy has been very low when I've had time to devote to role playing stuff, and I am GMing a group every 2 weeks, and that kind of has taken up my kind of creative energy just to do that, and so I'm hoping to get kind of back into more stuff starting up towards the end of this year. In the next few months, I'm kind of wanting to kickstart that again. Things have kind of been getting a bit better with sleep patterns and stuff.
Yes.
Boring parent stuff, but things are starting to
so major.
Get a bit better. Yeah. And I've got 2 kids. My oldest is 10, so he's at the age where it's just like, okay, if they're both like that, I'm golden. But 3-year-olds a bit.
In a couple more years, the older one can look after the little one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he'll love that.
yeah. You just have to bribe them. At what point did you become aware of solo and that was a thing?
COVID.
Yeah. Standard answer on this show.
Yeah. I mean, I was aware of Mythic. I had the PDF. Again, I've got thousands of PDFs in my drive-through catalog, so that doesn't mean much to say, I'd bought the PDF at some point during a deal of the day or something. And I remember reading through Mythic, or trying to read Mythic at some point, and just kind of got bogged down and lost, because it is very, very verbose. Verbose is maybe a bit harsh, but it's got a lot of text in it. And to get to the meat of how the game is played, you really have to devote yourself to it. And I just wasn't at the time that I had good groups I was playing with. I had some amazing campaigns, some amazing GMs. I really enjoyed GMing myself. So at the time I was like, I don't really need solo. So like, if I can't get into this thing, then whatever. It's too complex. Solo gaming is far too complicated for me. I wasn't really aware of the journaling scene, which was happening pre-COVID, but everything solo related in the hobby really exploded with COVID. And same for me. I didn't have any local groups, but there were a lot more people just talking about solo play, and I started thinking about it a bit more, and just being in tabletop communities, decided to give it another shot, especially after Ironsworn came out. We had Sean Tompkin on the Mud and Blood podcast, so we interviewed him. We actually were lucky enough to play, I don't think Liam did, but I played in a co-op game with Sean, so I was like, the creator of Ironsworn ran a game with me.
Nice.
And that really kind of opened my eyes up to solo a lot more. I think I had read something and was a little bit interested already by then. But that interview and that actual play with Sean really is what kickstarted my full interest in solo. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're aware because of the podcast, there's a lot of misconceptions about solo. A lot of people think like, what's the point? I play role playing for the social side of the hobby. Yeah. And for me, it's the analogy I always like to make is like video games. Like you can enjoy both multiplayer video games and single player video games. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Sure.
And
you get different things out of it, right?
Absolutely. And even if you're a group only role player, the skills you learn as a person by solo role playing translate really, really well over into group play as well, in terms of just thinking on your feet. That improv, all those improv skills, especially if you're GM, my God, like it just supercharged my GMing by doing solo play. I'd noticed that very quickly, like, just solo playing a handful of times and then GMing afterwards. I was like, oh yeah, actually, I don't need to be so worried about the players going in a direction I hadn't thought of. Just like literally... I don't even need to use oracles. Like the players are giving me prompts all the time. I can just run off of. It's like it's just really like really, really good like alternative skill set that's complementary to group play as well. So and since then I kind of do a mix of both. I don't solo play as much as I, again, because of that limited creative energy, and I'm mostly plugging that into prepping my GM games. I don't really do much solo play at the moment, but I do have a commission coming up, and I'll need to do some play testing for that once I start designing for it. So that'll be happening again soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I was talking the other day. Do you know Mike Shea from...
Yep. Lazy DM.
Lazy DM,
book.
yeah.
Yep.
I was talking to him the other day, and that was really interesting because he has come across solo recently as a long-term, thousands and thousands of games GM. Yeah. And just saying how, he didn't really get it. And until you try it, you really don't know what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
And he was talking as well, saying it was only then that he understood it's actually a completely different thing that gives you different stuff and is all pulling into these transferable skills that go into co-op play or DMing or even being a player sometimes or designing a world or, all these kinds of things. At what point did you come across Forbidden Lands?
Oh, yeah.
I reckon you like Forbidden Lands.
So I was designing... so I got really heavily into the Free League ecosystem pretty much at the beginning. They released Mutant Year Zero with Modiphius back at the end of 2014, and I would sign up to the Modiphius newsletter. So I got the newsletter when it was being released, and I was initially like, I don't know, and then eventually I kind of like, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet, I'm going to buy this thing. So it was like very early 2015. I bought the big package with it was like, I don't know, £100 at the time, or just over that. So it was like the most expensive game I'd bought at the time, and it came with the map and the tokens and all, and the cards and the dice and all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. My group loved it. I played the hell out of that game. And then that was also around the time that I was getting into Kickstarter really heavily. So I pretty much backed every single Free League Kickstarter after I got into it. So I've been on the Free League train from the beginning. I've backed literally, well, I shouldn't say I've backed every Free League game, because I didn't back Invincible, and I won't be backing Invincible because I'm not a big superheroes fan. But otherwise, like I've been there alongside Free League from the beginning. Really enjoy their games, really enjoy their system, and so much so that before they released Forbidden Lands, I started hacking the rule set to create my own fantasy game using the system. At the time, they'd only had Mutant Year Zero and Coriolis, and I was like, okay, I've got this idea for like a Wolfrup inspired fantasy, like grim fantasy game.
Stop you there. What's that?
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Sorry. And yeah, I like really enjoyed playing Wolfrup. I've played and run every edition of it, and just always kind of struggled with the rule sets across all the editions, and thought this could be really good fit for the Year Zero engine. So I started working on it, and then Forbidden Lands came out, and they also, as one of the stretch goals for Forbidden Lands, they did the Free League the OGL.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Good timing.
Yeah. Anyway, so that got me into that side of things as well. But yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I was just about to ask, because you really like the Year Zero engine, and so you hacked that into another game. Because I did the opposite. I don't love the Year Zero engine, and I hacked something else into it, and I actually play Forbidden Lands with a different hack now.
Okay. You have to remember, like, my first game was Star Wars, West End game Star Wars, which is a D6 dice pool system.
Ah, okay.
So, like, my whole introduction to the hobby, I have a definitely, like, nostalgia for D6 dice pools. So, I know some people don't like it. My co-host on the Mud and Blood podcast, Liam, really doesn't like D6 dice pools, and that's cool. There's room for all of us in the hobby.
Yeah.
So, but for me, that was very much a case of, like, I really like the system. I'm very much a system nerd as well. Like I like tinkering with mechanics and stuff, and that's kind of what led me to that route rather than the other way, like you've said, the way you've done it.
What is it that you like about the D6 dice pool system?
Well, I don't
There's
think
nothing to like, in my opinion, but I'm just interested.
there's a really good website by I think Mythcreants. They did a thing about like what are the advantages of the D6 dice pool system, and it hits on a lot of them. I mean, one of the big drawbacks that a lot of people quote is that it's a bit opaque in terms of your chances for success and failure. And while that is a valid answer, it's not completely true, because you definitely get the vibes from whether you're going to have better odds at succeeding or not by just how many dice you're rolling. Yeah. It's obvious the more dice you're going to be rolling, the more likely is you're going to get a 6, or in West End in Star Wars, a higher number. And I actually think that actually works really well for when you fail, or even when you succeed, because things like Wolfrup, which is a D100 system, it's very clear. I know exactly what my odds are for this skill because I have a 45 in the skill. So I've got a 45% chance of succeeding. Fine. But it's like, not everybody is, and I have a degree in maths, so I should be more drawn to the systems that have, more concrete probabilities and things. But I'm actually the other way around. And in my games of make-believe, I kind of like that it's a bit opaque, and I don't ever think about what the odds of success are. I like that it's kind of a bit like, yeah, maybe I'll I have a better chance if I'm going to re-roll. I have a better chance if I have more dice. So that aspect of it is very appealing. It's very quick also to deal with modifiers and to find your successes, because you're literally just looking for 6s in the dice pool. It's super quick. Yeah. And modifiers are basically more or less dice in the pool. So it's actually very, very quick at the table compared to, I mean, there are the games that are like that as well, but I prefer that than to having, plus number next to your stat, like thinking of, for example, Powered by the Apocalypse, where you're kind of dealing with, rolling 2 dice and then adding a modifier to it. Or D&D is the worst worst for it, in my opinion, because you not only give a number on your character sheet that is actually not the number that you're actually using. And of course, the OSR handles that really brilliantly with my favorite interpretation, which is having a D20 roll under system.
That's mine as well.
And I do love the OSR. I love a lot of the games in it. But still, my preference would be for dice pools. And I think just the two big things that really I like is the fact that the success and failure probabilities are a bit opaque, but also easy to grok.
Yeah. And
I also really like that it's quick to kind of add modifiers or things like that to your dice and to see what your result is. It runs very quickly at the table. So, for example, I mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse. I find 2d6 systems very boring. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I prefer to have big piles of dice to be rolling. Like, it's kind of an exciting physical thing that you're doing, compared to always rolling the 2d6, or for a percentile dice system, rolling the percentile dice, etc.
But that's it. That's my issue. Like, it's not an issue. I think it's I completely agree with everything you're saying. I really like how you can just add or subtract dice, and it's really clear. You roll and you just scan the table rather than doing any numbers in your head, and you can just see. But for me, it's that feel bad of having a massive pile of dice and then nothing showing up. And you're like,
every Free League fan will have an anecdote about how they rolled 14, 15, 16 dice, then pushed it and didn't get a single success twice. And it's like, I mean, that's odds, that's probabilities, right?
Yeah,
and it's like you could have a 99 in a skill in a D100 game and be rolling 100 4 or 5 times in a roll.
When that happens, you feel like, oh man, how unlucky was I that I just got that one. There was that 1% chance. Anyway,
that's the same. That's on the flip side. Like, the chances of you not rolling a 6 with lots of dice is also minuscule. So it's also a case of like you're flipping it around in your head. Like, okay, I probably at a 99.5% chance of succeeding here, but I didn't roll a single 6. Like, what the hell? Yeah. I don't know.
The thing that I really do like, though, and that I did sort of try to transfer over into my hack of it. My hack was using like the white hack sort of rules. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with white hack?
I've not read it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So I mean, OSR, but D20 rolling under.
Yeah.
But rolling under your own skill rather than some number on the thing.
Yeah.
And what I do really like is that feel of because you are losing your probability of success in Forbidden Lands or in Mutant Year Zero system, you're losing your probability of success as the fight goes on, right? Because you're taking damage to your strength or whatever, your numbers are going down, and it feels sort of more and more desperate, which is cool. But on the flip side, you're getting the willpower points, which is sort of giving you these hopefully more powerful abilities, which sort of ameliorate those odds a little bit and come back. And that feeling is really cool. It's that like fighting tooth and nail, and really getting low, and then you're down to, I've got only 2 dice left and I really need to make this, and then you get your 2 sixes, And that's a really cool feeling.
I would say my least favorite implementation of the Year Zero engine is Forbidden Lands.
Interesting.
And
it's the only one I've played, actually.
I mean, the things that you're mentioning are very specific to Forbidden Lands, that willpower points, and Mutant Year Zero to an extent as well, because they're very, very similar in terms of how the mechanics are. But none of the other games have this sort of death spiral or generating things like willpower points or mutation points with taking damage. My favorite game is actually Alien, which handles it very differently. You have a single dice pool for everything, attributes, skills, gear, modifiers. It all just goes into your base pool. And then you basically get stress. If you want to push a roll, you take a stress, and stress is a different different pool. And there are face huggers on the one face of the die. So the idea is that as you take more stress, you're adding to your dice pool. There's 6s on the stress dice also count. So your probability of success is still ramping up because stress makes you like focus a bit more. But there's a chance if any of those stress die land on a 1, you're going to panic. And there's this panic table that happens, and you immediately you stop. You may or may not keep the successes that you rolled, but you stop and you have to look at what the panic result. Roll on the panic table. It fits Alien really well, but I've also played it in other systems. One of the games I've been developing, we tried out the Alien system with a more generic panic table that wasn't quite so xenomorph focused. But that's my favorite role-playing game by Free League. It's my favorite implementation of the Year Zero engine. I do also really like Tales from the Loop, which is what I've used for Year Zero Mini, which is just a single dice pool, nothing else about it. Only the 6s count. And as you take damage, you basically have a negative modifier to your dice pool. So it's kind of got that similar idea to Forbidden Lands, but it's not quite as well. It is. I mean, it is kind of as bad. The flip side with Tales from the Loop is that there's also luck points. So you get because you're playing kids, your age determines how many luck points you get. The younger you are, the more luck you have. And those luck points are basically free rerolls that don't mean anything. So, but once you run out of those luck points, to reroll you have to take damage. So that's kind of a nice little tweak on it that doesn't make it quite so harsh with the death spiral. And but yeah, I mean the stuff you're talking about for Forbidden Lands, like why you don't like it so much, that is a very, very specific thing to Forbidden Lands. It's very much feeds into its entire themes of survival. Really well, because you have that kind of you feel the crunch a lot, and the willpower points are the one thing I don't really like, because it takes it from being a survival fantasy fairly dark to kind of having this high fantasy side of it where you're you have these it's basically like a magic, you've got building up mana to do these really cool talents. And in the original game Mutant Year Zero, they're called mutation points, and you use them to activate your mutation powers, which are basically like superhero powers. And that worked really well because it was kind of you can kind of understand you have these mutations in your body, but the only way that they get activated is when you kind of get stressed, or you take your body or your mind gets stressed by something, and then it's this response that comes out. You can kind of understand it a bit better. Whereas with willpower, it's kind of well, why do I have to take damage to have the will to do my boring ass talent of what I should be able to do all the time? It doesn't. It's kind of a bit harder to grok. But
speaking of Forbidden Lands, though, so you got that on Kickstarter, I presume, then?
Yeah.
And at what point did you look at that and think, I need to make solo rules for this? How did that whole project come about?
By the time Forbidden Lands had come out, I'd already been involved with I'd already played the game with Sean Tompkin. I played Ironsworn, and started getting into solo. And I think I'd even I'd been playing a lot of solo games, a lot. I'd been playing a few solo games and just kind of dipping my feet into it. I'd also started this fantasy game that I had been working on. I was also looking at and playtesting solo rules for it as well. So I was kind of like really dipping my toes quite heavily into the solo scene. I'd also written a number of things for Free League in terms of they didn't have the workshop, I don't think, at the time. I think the workshop was unlocked with, from memory, with Forbidden Lands as well. But there was like a very active community, and we were sharing a lot of like homebrew stuff across like Facebook and Discord and stuff. And also at that time, I was very, very heavily into the community. I still am, but not quite to the same extent. Like I was the owner of, I can't remember, like the Discord server. I created a bunch of stuff. I was very active on their forums, so I was kind of a known entity to them. I knew their system in and out, and I basically wrote them an email. And they had I can't remember if they'd announced the solo at the time or if I'd suggested it to them. I'd have to go back and check my emails. But either way, either they announced it as a stretch goal and I got in touch with them immediately because I was getting the Kickstarter updates and said, hey, here's a little bit about me. I'd love to do the solo rules here. Or if I pitched it to them during the Kickstarter as a potential stretch goal. Either way, I got in touch with them while the Kickstarter was still live and got the commission for that. So
excellent. And I'm very glad you did.
I'm sorry. I'm mixing these things up a bit. The solo stuff was a part of the Book of Beasts Kickstarter, which is their bestiary. Yeah. I'm sorry, it wasn't part of the original one at all. My God, I'm mixing everything up here. But it still happened like that. I think I may have actually, because I was thinking like by the time Forbidden Lands came out, I don't think I had been doing that much solo, but definitely by the time Book of Beasts has come out, I definitely had been doing a lot more. And anyway, it's still the same. I can't remember if I contacted them or if they contacted me, but that was my first commission with them.
What did the design process look like for you? Did you already have things in your head? Like at that point, if it was, I mean, being the Book of Beasts, you had played Forbidden Lands then a fair bit. Did you have ideas already, or you just saw an opportunity?
This was also the thing. It's coming back to me. I apologize. My memory is sometimes really bad. I had actually run a solo actual play on my YouTube channel using, I don't know if you know who Peter Rudden Burgess is. He's or Parts Per Million, the publishing.
It rings a bell, but
he basically is extremely prolific in releasing solo rule sets for pretty much every game he's allowed to do. He's got like, I don't know, over 100 solo hacks on Drive-Thru RPG. The issue with them, in my opinion, is that he does play every game and he tailors it to every game he's playing, but he has a pretty cookie cutter approach to how he delivers it. His approach, which is maybe a little bit disingenuous, but anyway, I don't want to get into it too much. He did a Forbidden Lands hack for Forbidden Lands, for a solo hack or solo rule set, and I used it to run a solo game of Forbidden Lands and had a blast doing it. But I kind of modified it a little bit because that's kind of what I do. And I used that to talk to Free League, actually, when I talked to them about it and said, look, I'm really familiar with Forbidden Lands, of course, and I've already played it solo using somebody else's rule set, but I've got a lot of ideas for it, blah, 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 blah. They'd also already done a solo rule set, their first solo rule set for Twilight 2000. That was their dipping their toes into the solo field. But that was the author of the book had actually written the solo rules as well as part of it. That was it might have been a stretch goal, I can't remember, for the Kickstarter. And part of the discussions with Free League was, okay, they're happy for me to do it, but they, once we had started having meetings about it, they had a very, very clear vision of how they wanted it to be. And one of those was they had good feedback with the solo rules for Twilight 2000, so they wanted to do something similar. That means card-based oracles and bringing cards into play, because that wasn't really a thing in Forbidden Lands. There were no cards in the original Kickstarter and the core box. There are cards, but they're not really. It's like gear cards that are kind of useless, and initiative cards, and I think the advanced combat cards were a part of the Kickstarter. But there's no you didn't get like a 52 card playing deck of cards or anything like that. So.
So they gave you some pretty clear pretty clear guidelines as to
I mean,
the feel or the shape that they wanted.
They were, I wouldn't say like they didn't really dictate like this is exactly what we want. They gave me some constraints with how they wanted it to look and left me free to kind of design around that.
Which is great for design.
Yeah, which is for designing is perfect. Like if you're doing your own stuff, it's like you kind of have to create design goals and really constrain yourself, in my opinion, to be able to actually finish something, because otherwise if you don't have clear constraints like, well, this is what I want, I have to fit it within these constraints, you're just going to keep tweaking stuff and you'll never end up finishing. So the constraints was really helpful. And while I kind of at the time I kind of embraced it and was kind of going with it, but when I was actually playtesting and stuff, I was thinking like, I don't know, I was kind of going back and forth on whether I liked it or not. So I never really felt strong like this is amazing. But since, I have to say, I have come back around where I do really like the card-based oracles, and I'll explain why. In a game, and I'll use Ironsworn as a whipping boy, as a whipping post here, because one of the things that I don't like about Ironsworn and Starforged is the pure amount of rolling you're doing for everything. You are just rolling dice constantly for both oracles and for skill checks and all that kind of stuff. And there's just a lot of dice rolling. What I feel is if you have a system where you have both, like Forbidden Lands, and you embrace that, and you think of it like the cards are being used for my oracles. And a nice way to think about that is tarot, right? Tarot is used for divination. And if you put yourself into that mindset of being like, okay, my cards is for divination, and the dice are for interacting with the system itself, the mechanics, then it kind of works really well. And what you can actually do is you can like shuffle a deck of cards at like the start of every morning is how it works in Forbidden Lands. And you can lay out like 10 cards in front of you and just be like, okay, this is my destiny kind of for the day. And as things are happening, like I'm going to turn over the next card. Okay, this was going to happen anyway because I've laid out the cards like a tarot divination deck.
I see what you mean.
And
that's a nice touch.
If you just have a deck of cards, you're like, oh, flip the next card. It kind of feels like, well, why am I not just rolling dice? It's a bit more elegant. Why do I have to have a deck of cards? But if you really embrace the divination side of things, then it kind of, in my opinion, it does make for a more interesting experience. It makes you interact with the cards. It's just a little tweak. It's like a little like life hack, if you will, where you're kind of like telling yourself like, okay, I'm not just using the cards as a random number generator, which is what you actually are doing. I'm actually using this. This is divining what's going to happen. And when if I spread the cards out in front of me, I know that I'm fixing what's going to be happening there. And
that's really
you could even say like, actually, maybe I'm not gonna flip the next one. Maybe I'm gonna flick the one at the end and feel like you're kind of playing with your destiny a bit. There's a lot of little things you can do with it, which is kind of interesting. And when I started thinking of it like that, I kind of really embraced that idea. But I have had a lot of people complain about it since. So I know it's not a universally beloved approach, and I probably won't be using cards. There's one project where cards are part of the main focus anyway, because it deals with tarot. There's still dice, and that one will definitely be using cards for the solo oracles, but everything else I'm kind of like, I know it alienates a lot of people, and if you don't have cards, you never get people saying, why aren't there more cards in your oracles? So just to make it a little bit more universally appealing, I've kind of thought for my own projects, I'm going to step back from it a bit.
That's a really interesting idea that you just mentioned about that mindset of the tarot and the divining things out, and this is your fate for the day, and that's something I'm absolutely going to try. You should have that in your rules.
I mean, it's something I realized after playtesting and after coming back to it years later, and I was kind of recent, I don't know, like a year ago maybe. Yeah,
I can see that it does put you in the mindset of you sort of like helping separate between you and the character as well, right? Because when you're flipping those cards, you're looking over things as, divinity, seeing what's going to happen and asking questions. And also the one thing that I do like about the cards, and I've just been flipping them off the back of the deck, but now I'm absolutely going to lay them out in front of me, is that little bit of a feeling of maybe you have a bit more of an understanding of the probability the further the day goes on. Yeah. Because you've only drawn black cards. And
it's that poker thing, right? If you're counting the cards. Yeah.
If you've got them all out in front of you and you've drawn all high blacks, you're like, okay, now I really need a win here. The chance that this next one is a red, and it might affect the way that you ask that question. It kind of like almost a little mini game in there.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
And there's other, you can take it in different directions too. You could even do tarot spreads, you know. One thing I did with one of my projects was using cards for life path generation and having tables for life, because it's like your life path is something that's kind of like your background is maybe something that's a bit out of your control. And I arranged the life path system so that you actually you shuffle a deck of cards and you lay out a spread that is in the picture of like a stick man with like 9 cards. And it's kind of like you work your way like flipping the cards over so that it's kind of like there's this idea
Building
of it being a
yourself
spread, but also it's like it's affecting your person, your character. So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe a little bit pretentious, but I kind of really like that. That idea, and that obviously taps into tarot spreads, because they have these different spreads to determine different things. And there's also some really cool card based like DM helping tools and stuff, and like story decks where they actually have specific decks spreads that you do for these cards. I think one of them is called Story Forge, I think, off the top of my head. Okay. They kind of famously have one, a book of different spreads. And the idea is like the first card is like your hero's background. The next card is your hero's journey and blah, 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 like who's an antagonist. And so it's kind of these different cards in the different spread are telling different parts of whatever you're doing with the spread. And that kind of stuck with me as well, because I did that as a GMing tool. I backed that on Kickstarter before I ever got into solo role-playing too. So I think that also is something in the back of my head, like cards can be more than just an alternative random number generator. They can actually be they can kind of tap into this sort of idea of divination, which you don't really get from dice. You could, but it's just a bit different.
And like you say, that the ability that, I mean, A, that the probability is changing as you use them. B, I mean, I'm not actually very familiar with tarot, but I can see it as a really interesting concept, especially in roleplay in general and story creation. But like you say, with those different types of spreads, they can influence the shape of a narrative arc as well, right? In theory. Yeah. I mean, if you say, okay, you're going to have 3 cards here are going to be the complication or whatever, and you can weight the different elements of a narrative arc perhaps with cards. Cool. I've got to look more into tarot.
I've done a solo expansion for Forbidden Lands as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
I got it printed on Lulu.
Cool. Yeah. So that also was like most of the tables in that, if not all the tables in that, are card based as well, for the very reason. Things like weather tables. There are weather table precedents in Bitter Reach, for example. And I think one of their other games had a weather table in it, but it's rolling dice, and I was like, no, I need to be using cards. And of course, a card can tell you, for a weather table, can tell you 2 things. It can tell you the suit, and it can tell you the value. So you can actually use it for 2 different things: temperature and precipitation, for example. So that was kind of a nice way of like tying into things like weather, random mishaps. Like I did a huge overhaul of the mishap tables in that. Like massive. I have basically like a 13 entry. So like looking at the values of the cards, a 13 entry table for mishaps. Different types of mishaps have different tables, and I split them across either seasons, if that makes sense, for like making camp is seasonal, and making lead the way mishaps are based on your biome or your terrain that you're in. And then there's also like a hunting, foraging, and fishing mishap table. And that's based on whether you're hunting, foraging, or fishing. And that was also really fun to use the Oracle with, because obviously you're rolling a D66 in the core rules, but it's a compressed D66 table with something like, 8 entries or so for each one. And that was kind of a big thing that people were talking about, was like, if you just have a single lead the way mishap table, you're eventually rolling the same mishaps over and over again. And it also kind of sometimes didn't make sense, where you're like, okay, I'm in the mountains. Why am I rolling for mosquitoes when I guess it's something else annoying me, like biting midges, or it's like, I don't know. It's winter time. We're in the winter season. We're in the mountains. There's no mosquitoes here. Like, what's going on here? And yeah, kind of tweaking it really, for me, made a lot of sense in that respect. So yeah, and I think that's where I kind of got into really the expansions, where I really got into the embracing the cards and thinking like, okay, I need to use cards here as much as possible. There's a few exceptions to that, which is mostly when I'm adapting existing stuff in the core rulebook, and I don't want to kind of have to redo everything in the core rulebook. I'm not really at liberty to copy content from the core rulebook to like redo a table or something, especially as I'm selling the expansion. So yeah, again, constraints, but I'm kind of really happy with that, and I've done a lot of playtesting with it as well, and really happy with the expansion on top of the solo rule set. And I'm my next thing I'm going to do, my next solo project on my YouTube channel is going to be going back to season 2 of my Forbidden Lands solo actual play, and
Fantastic.
doing the season 2 with the solo rules plus the expansion. So kind of
Excellent.
a way of showing like this is how you can use them both together. So that'll come one day.
Wonderful. Well, for one, I started off with the Book of Beasts stuff and really enjoyed it. And then I learned somewhere, I don't know where, that there was, that you had also done an extended expansion of the same idea. And now that's what I use. It's fantastic. I hadn't really thought about the difference that you'd made between cards and dice. To me, it was just more depth to the procedures that I was doing. And I really love it. I highly recommend it to everyone. We talk about it in our Patreon Discord when we're in Forbidden Lands fever, which is whenever I put it back on my table and then can't get it off again for for weeks on end.
And it's cool that you say as well, like the nice thing about divorcing it from the dice is that you can use a different, if you want to hack the Forbidden Lands system into something else, like a D20 roll under, you're still using the solo stuff card-based, it just works because you're not having to worry about rolling D6. Like, D66 feels a bit different here. I mean, I guess you are still rolling D66 for things like random encounters and stuff.
Sure, but it does separate it a bit more. It's a nice feeling of separation, and those feelings of procedures, and each part having its own space in your head really helps me play as well, especially when you're dealing with what is, I mean, a reasonably complex thing to do, play solo, right? And you're often juggling multiple books. I mean, now I think I have four books for Forbidden Lands, plus your little printout, plus the little heroes background book, and plus a cheat sheet. You know, like it adds up pretty quick. And the Book of Beasts, and I've just started playing Raven's Purge through solo as well, which is another book to put on the table, which is wonderful.
How are you finding? I mean, I did playtest a couple of the adventure sites in that. It was kind of like,
yeah, I haven't gotten to any adventure sites yet. I did in my first sort of season that I was playing through it. I did Weatherstone from the core book, which was my first sort of adventure site, and I mean, I've talked about it before, but I just for you, I started out just sort of playing through the published stuff, you know, with one eye open sort of thing. And then the second half of it, I started doing a little bit of what Tana recommended. I was talking to her one day, and she recommended like just testing the points of interest within the adventure site as to if they actually happened or not. You know, is that actually right? Sure. And so you're sort of testing that, and if not, you're sort of modifying or tweaking it.
Yeah.
And I found that to be quite effective, actually, and quite enjoyable. And the fact that they are broken down into small, sort of bite-sized little components in each point of interest, I thought really lent itself well to, I assume, GMing as well, but also for playing solo.
Yeah, I can see that would work with GMing too. It gives you a bit of it frees you up a bit from being like, I have to run this as written, and give it its own spin for sure. Yeah.
Now I know you are busy on today, on Sunday's day, and you don't have much time left. Is there any of your projects, apart from the Forbidden Lands solo expansion, any other of your projects that you want to highlight quickly that maybe solo players should go and check out?
Sure. I also wrote the solo rules for The Walking Dead role-playing game by Free League. I think that's, I'm really, really proud of that. And
I haven't played it.
People who play it really rave about it.
This is what they do to me. The people in the Discord who are playing it are raving about the solo rules, and I haven't got it yet.
So I wrote those too.
Cool.
Not card-based because cards weren't really a part of that game. But I had a lot of fun developing that. It's got a lot of narrative stuff in it. I was able to convince Free League to create a solo worksheet for it, which basically captures all of your like NPCs, plot lines, the rumors and things so that there's mechanics in the solo rules that tie into that to help like figure out what's happening with them. And it just, for me, the Walking Dead is it's a very narrative game. You think like zombie apocalypse. I've actually, before it came out, this is also how I kind of got the gig for that. I had been running a Patreon-based Western Marches zombie apocalypse, heavily inspired by The Walking Dead, that I was calling Kentucky Zombie Apocalypse, because it makes a nice 3-letter acronym, of course. Yeah. So set obviously in the hills of Kentucky, of eastern Kentucky, where it's very rural. Everyone's got guns. And you can kind of play around with the accents a bit. I was playing with people who live in Appalachia, and they were kind of like enjoying me butchering the accent. Actually, I have family, like my grandparents lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is just over the border from Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I have family who live in Kentucky. So that's also why I kind of could tap into like my accents that I kind of am familiar with. Like my uncle, for example, has a kind of Kentucky Hills accent.
Right.
Anyway, so that was a lot of fun, and that kind of got me into The Walking Dead. That was my into The Walking Dead. Is like, okay, I really love The Walking Dead anyway. I've read the comics. I watched, admittedly, not all of the seasons of the TV show, but I got pretty far. I got to like season 8 or something when the Whisperers were coming in, and then eventually lost interest, or after Rick disappears temporarily, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was very familiar with it. I love the zombie apocalypse genre. Anyway, I've read a lot of books with it, played a lot of video games, watched a lot of TV and movies relating to it. So kind of a big fanboy with that genre anyway. And the nice thing about the system is that it's extremely narrative. It actually uses the Alien system as its kind of like focus, but it's way more narrative than Alien is. And it makes more sense because in Alien, one of the problems you have is that there's a lot of tension, but like the panic tables only make sense when there's a xenomorph in the area, because some of the results are like you might go berserk and start attacking people around you. It's like, well, if I'm just stressed out because like I can't get this thing to work, I'm not going to pull my gun out and shoot my friend in the head. It doesn't make sense unless it's life or death. You've got a crazy alien monster trying to rip you apart. But in The Walking Dead, you always have the threat of there being zombies literally everywhere around you. And and even then they've toned down the panic tables on it. It's not even called panic tables, it's called something else. So it's more narrative, and it works really, really, really well for solo play because it's an extremely narrative system. It's by the guy who developed the Tales from the Loop and Vaesen. Also did The Walking Dead, and they're all the very narrative versions of the Year Zero engine. So I already had this really, really nice core rule set to work with that was very narrative, player facing as well. So it's just like it just was very easy to create solo content for. And really, the fun came with thinking about plot structure, and that was the thing I didn't have to do with Forbidden Lands, because Forbidden Lands has a very clear game loop. It's, you've got your things that happen during the day when especially when you're exploring, right? And The Walking Dead didn't really have that. So I had to develop a game loop that worked for solo play and had a ton of fun. It was a huge design challenge. My play testing was just a blast, figuring this stuff out. When it worked, I was just like, I had such a good feeling like, oh my God, this is coming together so well. And the marriage of that narrative player facing system with this like solo narrative structure, just when it was finished, I just felt so proud of it. And unfortunately, it's not one of Free League's bigger games, which I think is fair. People are burnt out on The Walking Dead. It's not in the zeitgeist as much as other stuff is. They kind of missed the train on it, I think. But yeah, I'm really super proud of that solo system. So if you get a chance to try it out, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm way more proud of that than I am for Forbidden Lands. Forbidden Lands I'm proud of. I think I've done a really good job on that. But that was my first solo gig, and I did definitely have constraints with how I had to do it. Whereas with The Walking Dead, I had a lot of freedom. And even things like I like the theme table in that one. I had a lot of fun developing that and having it on. It's a not a D6. Is it a D66? I guess it is a D. No, it's a. Oh God, I think it's a D60, a 666 table from memory.
Okay.
I might have to get this out.
That's a big table.
It's a big table. There's a lot of different themes in it. I can't remember how many entries. I think it's a D6. I think it might be like a D3666 table or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot of entries in it anyway. And I kind of have it themed with like half the entries are negative and half of them are neutral or positive. So there's certain times where you would roll on one half of it or not. Anyway.
Cool.
So that's what I'd like to plug. The other one that I did most recently, I spent an entire year writing a book for Outgunned, which is now one of the Free League published games, but it's actually by a different publisher, Two Little Mice. And I wrote an entire like expansion booklet for it called the Assistant Director Book. And I'm super proud of that one as well. It has solo rules in the back half, and the front half is basically campaign creation guidelines for creating a cinematic campaign. And they have, again, the guys who created this game, their background is in cinema and script writing and stuff. So they're like super into, like, they know their cinematic stuff. And while I was writing it, they had a lot of feedback in terms of making it feel more cinematic or tweaking things so that it fits more in with like how cinema runs and how those sort of things work, which is really interesting to be a part of that process. The solo rules, I also had a lot of fun creating that as well. So it's again a very different system. It uses a different. It's still dice pools, D6 dice pools, but it's different to the Year Zero engine. But the front half of that book, I feel like people don't talk about this very much. I had a really big playtesting group for this, and they were like raving about it at the end. I was really happy. It's like, okay, this obviously landed well. Nobody's saying like, it's okay, I don't think I'm going to use it though. It's a bit too heavy or whatever. It went through lots of playtesting phases and with a playtesting group as well. And I'm really proud of that one as well. Less the solo rules. I mean, I'm proud of the solo rules too, but it's the first time that I've really tackled things like campaign creation, campaign creation process as a thing on its own. And there's also like I created a worksheet to go with that, and there's a separate solo worksheet for the solo stuff. And I just feel like the thing that people don't know about that is the campaign creation stuff is very, very much system agnostic. You could use that book, the first half of that book, which is all the campaign creation stuff, for literally any campaign of any game. It's none of it is tied into the mechanics of Outgunned at all. And it just like tackles things like looking at a campaign initially from the perspective of the bad guy. You create your bad guy first.
Interesting.
They're the linchpin for what your campaign is based around, because you immediately start seeing like,
of course,
what's their agenda? What are they trying to do? How do I tie into that? Who's my patron? Who's my patron who's trying to stop them? Because you think about like Mission Impossible and Bond and like big action things, there's usually a patron. There's somebody there who's like employing or feeding. Even like Supernatural as a TV show, they have that guy, that kind of older guy, Bobby, I think his name is, who's like, you've never seen. There's this old guy. Supernatural is two like 20-something hunks who are basically doing an X-Files style, stopping bad things every week, but with shotguns and knives, and trying to like operate on like try to keep it hidden, because if there's like a werewolf that they're trying to kill, it's actually a person behind the werewolf, and if they kill that person, it's like then they're murderers, right? The cops aren't going to believe that you killed a werewolf, that sort of thing. So it's kind of this really nice horror thing. It ran on for like a ridiculous number of seasons, but one of the characters in that is this older guy who's also like a retired hunter, and he feeds them information. So that's kind of like a perfect type of patron that isn't actually paying them a wage, but is kind of there as a source of information. So that kind of idea of starting with I'm sure other games have done this, but not that I'm aware of, and it was really driven by Outgunned itself in the core rules, which really has a big focus on the big bad at the start, but no other campaign creation stuff. So by looking at that and using it as a linchpin really just blew my mind open with campaign creation, because it's you're not thinking of like, what kind of meta plot do I have? It's like, no, who's the big bad? What are they trying to do? And how does that feed everything else that comes into play? And it's like it just falls into place after that, and it's
it inherently gives them the depth that a good villain needs, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just end up with this shallow,
and you have a timeline
thing.
Because if you think of like what's their aim, what are they trying to achieve, then you don't have an open-ended. I mean, you could still do a sandbox game for sure within that framework, but you do definitely have like a timeline of like, okay, if you don't like mess up their plans, then they're going to achieve their plans, and the bad stuff you're trying to stop is going to happen. And it doesn't have to be D&D style, the world is going to end. It can be low-level stuff like, maybe it's just like a gangster who wants to like take control of the underworld or something like that. And you have for whatever reason, you have personal stakes in that. And I have like random tables to generate all this stuff, MacGuffin tables, like all sorts of stuff in that like random tables galore, of course, because it's me developing it. Yeah. And I mean, it is very much contemporary focused, but I think you could easily like skin a lot of the tables in that for fantasy or sci-fi, and it would work just as well. In fact, because they have genre books called Action Flicks, they actually have 3 of them now, where you can skin it for literally fantasy, swords and sorcery, sci-fi, alien, martial arts. It had to be the assistant director campaign stuff had to be generic enough that it could be used for any genre. And I did kind of develop it that way, but there was maybe a bit more of a focus on contemporary stuff. So things like the theme tables and the solo table are not genre specific. Anyway, so those are the big ones. Those are the big ones I've been working on. I have finished, I guess, for other people. I've also created Year Zero Mini, which is a framework role-playing game for player facing. It uses Tales from the Loop as its core, but it's basically like a 6-page role-playing framework. So you can basically use it it's like, if you think of like Fate or GURPS or any other generic rule set, it's basically doing that, but with the Year Zero engine, and it's super lightweight. It's player facing. It's meant to be solo friendly. I am working very slowly on a second edition for it, which will include solo rules. But somebody has actually created, I think, a solo rule set for Year Zero Mini already. And there's other solo rule set stuff out there for the Year Zero engine, so it's pretty easy to find that. I'll be doing my own thing eventually too, but that's a gold bestseller on a gold medal bestseller on Drive-Thru as well. So it's kind of a very big seller for me, even though it's only like $2. I think it's not very expensive, but that's also something I'm really proud of. I've got a lot of fans of that. I've play tested the hell out of that thing. I'm constantly playing around, tweaking it. The 6 pages are each page is meant to be printed in landscape, and it has an entire topic on one page. So it's like the first page is character creation, then it's the rules, then it's combat, then it's adventure sparks, an entire page of like how to create adventures, how to tweak it for your different settings, and GMing tips. So it's like I think those are the six pages. So yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm working on lots of other small projects too, but I have so many things in the works right now. But Year Zero Mini is
bring
released,
you back
people
later
get their hands
and
on it. Yeah,
bring you back later, and you can talk about all those as well. Matt, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for being here. I will put links to all those things that you mentioned in the show notes of this show. Cool. I personally can highly recommend the Forbidden Land Solo Rules expansion. I now have to go and try The Walking Dead. Thank you for that. And hope to maybe get you on again one day to talk about some more design stuff, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always happy to come on.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt.
All right, PJ. Thanks for having me.